This week, we have two special guests. One is Hyrum Anderson from Endgame. He's the technical director for data science at Endgame. That's going to be a whole ton of fun. I don't think we've ever had a data scientist on the show. So brace yourselves for that. After that, Keith Hoodlet joins us from the InfoSec Mentor Project. Keith and Jimmy Vo are rekindling that project and have some exciting news to share with us and all of you. In the security news, I suppose we should talk about the CIA leaking data, WikiLeaks report on that, as well as an IoT Security Alliance. 185,000 Wi-Fi cameras on the web with insecure admin panels is always fun to talk about because that happens all the time. Why email is safer in Office 365? Let's see what else. And just so much more. So stay tuned for Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Brought to you by, the average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Synapsys is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsys.com. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame. Automate the hunt.
Howdy. Welcome to the show. I'd like to introduce you, our host. He's a man that says, "You're what you eat." But you know what? He must have eaten a sexy beast this morning. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, as Larry so eloquently gave my introduction. That was a good one, Larry. I liked it. We've got a fantastic show for you this evening. Of course, Larry's here in studio. Larry, welcome.
Hell yeah.
To the show. Episode 504 after the course, apparently.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
Which
Good stuff.
good.
Before I forget, I do have, when we get to announcements, I have one announcement that I'd like to do sort of towards the end, and that's fine. It's really quick.
Absolutely. On the lines via Skype, Mr. Carlos Perez is there with us. He's the man dressed in black, apparently. On the line.
Yeah. I'm still fighting to actually need to buy a new camera. So more than likely, I'll be checking one of those nice Logitech cameras so I can fix this.
Or just buy a smart TV.
Yeah, and then we can.
Hey! Wait!
Get you on camera.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Wait for it. That's what she said.
Yeah.
Mr. Jeff.
For some reason, my Mac refuses to recognize the FaceTime camera in Skype. Every other program works fine, but Skype,
It's because it's Microsoft's fault. Jeff Mann is here with us on the lines via Skype, actually, not actually here. Sometimes Jeff is here, and it's nice to have him here. But tonight we'll have to settle for Skype. Excuse me, for Skype. Welcome, Jeff.
How's it going, Paul?
It's going fantastic.
Hello, everyone.
Jack Daniels here with us. You got a really big microphone, Jack.
That's yeah.
You
yes.
say that. You
yes,
say
I
that,
do.
You say that to all the girls, Paul.
Apparently so.
I am here in beautiful Chicago, where it is not warm and sunny like it is at my place down on the beach down south.
Excellent. Well, it's you are always bright and sunny. Well,
Yeah,
sometimes
right.
bright and sunny.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not.
Sometimes.
Anyway, the 10th anniversary edition of Source Boston is being held this April, including training sessions on April 24th through the 25th, and conference talks on the 26th through the 27th, featuring awesome speakers from the security community. Events take place at the Courtyard Marriott downtown in Boston. Security Weekly listeners get a $100 discount on training or conference using the code SecurityWeekly. SourceConference.com has all the information. You can go there and register. We're also excited to be attending and covering the 13th annual Secure World Boston Conference on March 22nd and 23rd at the Heinz Convention Center. Secure World brings together New England cybersecurity community for high-quality training, collaboration, and networking. This year's theme is Surviving the Siege, Medieval Lessons in Modern Security. Don't miss presentations from Larry Wilson, Esmond Kane, Sandra Backick, and many more. Earn 12 to 16 CPE credits by attending. You, Security Weekly listeners, get $100 off that conference as well. See, it pays to listen to Security Weekly. SecureWorldExpo.com is the place to go for that. Larry, you said you also had an announcement.
Yes. Besides Orlando, coming up on April 8th, right before the Sands Orlando conference.
And somewhat after the other conference that we'll have an announcement about, InfoSec World.
Yes.
There's a lot going on in Orlando in the security world.
Yes,
huh?
absolutely. So, yeah, besides Orlando, April 8th, I will be speaking on something totally new and different, and I'm going to try something different. Just what the hell?
What are you speaking on, Larry?
So, I'm going to tell a story.
That's
and
good.
This was what we
Jason
About
Blanchard.
a man named Jed.
Yeah, and this was what we were talking about a little bit after the show that I never told you the story.
About Jack and Diane?
No, about two-factor authentication and the lack thereof. How could get somebody on?
I was talking about that in email today.
Yeah.
Larry and I are going to do a segment on the Arlo cameras because Larry and I both have them now. So look for that coming up maybe sometime this month. Actually, it may go into April before we can actually do that segment. Yep. But that's one of my gripes is no two-factor.
Yep. So quite honestly, I don't remember what the title is or what the actual write-up that I gave them was because I wrote it right on the website because it was like, hey, we need this now. And I'm like, all right, great, I got 10 minutes. So effectively what happened, the beginning of the story goes, is that I had an email address that I'd never used anywhere. And all of a sudden it started getting email one day.
Interesting.
And it got signed up for stuff. Juicy stuff.
Juicy stuff, huh? Mm-hmm. All right, well, don't give it away.
And that's it. That's all I'm going to tell you. It got signed up for juicy stuff.
Well, awesome. Well, here to talk about some juicy stuff. I'm very excited about our interview today. Yes. Hyrum Anderson is the technical director for data science at Endgame. Hyrum, it's very nice to meet you, and it's very nice to have you on the show this evening for Paul Security Weekly.
My pleasure to be here, and great to be here with great guests, great smart folks in the industry, Paul, Larry, Carlos, Jeff, Jack. I am a relative newcomer compared to all of you to InfoSec.
We get that a lot.
Yeah,
I bet.
So, Hyrum, and typically I ask the guests how they get their start in information security, but let's back up. Like, what was your career and interest before kind of delving into information security?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I studied formally in undergrad and master's and PhD in electrical engineering and with a focus in machine learning. So I came out of my master's program and PhD programs ready to tackle interesting problems related to security, but not InfoSec. So, my PhD was about trying to train machines when the data you feed it at training time is different than it gets to see at test time. And that's a really interesting problem. So after school, I worked for some time at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. That was great. That was sort of situational awareness in, the real world. And spent some time at Sandia National Laboratories, also a great experience in security. And then I sort of stole away to Mandiant, then later FireEye, and now Endgame. So here I am.
So, Hyrum, I want to ask you to kind of set the stage for today's discussion, given your background. What we hear these terms, and now they're being used so often in the marketing of companies in security. What's the difference, or define for us, big data, machine learning, and AI?
Yeah, a great question. And I'd agree with you, Paul, that anytime something is new, sometimes getting overhyped. And I think I'm a machine learning guy. I'm excited about machine learning, but I do think we can do a disservice to what we can bring to the table as data scientists when we sort of oversell or overhype. So let's see, the question, what is data science? What is machine learning? What is AI? So at a very macroscopic level, data science and big data is just about, looking at data. Big data comes in, you've probably heard this notion that big data is big because of its variety or volume or velocity, right? In marketing, especially in security, we hear a lot about artificial intelligence, about machine learning, and there's a difference. So I think when people hear artificial intelligence, this conjures up images of, I don't know, HAL 9000.
Yeah, like I want to close the pod bay door, and it won't let me. Yeah.
Or worse, like Terminator, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think Ex Machina, and I think you're the guy that got locked in the basement.
Right.
Or her.
Yeah.
Her.
Yep. Sorry. Continue, Hyrum.
So let's just define what is artificial intelligence. When you think about artificial intelligence, you should think about autonomous agents that behave and reason and interact with the world. So, like the AI in a computer game is an agent because it is making decisions, it's interacting with its environment, albeit a virtual environment. That's different than, that's sort of a superset, I should say, of machine learning, which focuses really on training models to predict and generalize from data. It's sort of a narrower scope. Mm-hmm. So in information security, when people say they use AI, I think that's probably mostly inaccurate, except for a few cases. What most people do is machine learning and data science.
So, Hyrum, I think one of the elephants in the room is that when we as security professionals hear the term machine learning, a lot of it is being kind of like from a lens of, hey, we can replace the human. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes with artificial intelligence, right? Like we can analyze the data that you security professionals have been analyzing by hand for so long, and we can just go ahead and replace you. And I think a lot of us are uncomfortable with that. I think a lot of us also see the value in that in certain circumstances. So to what extent are we using machine learning, and does it replace what we're doing as humans analyzing the data?
We would love to be able to replace humans in this experts who are expensive, and there are a few of them, but that's just not going to happen in the near future. I like to think about what we bring to the table as supplementing and enhancing what the human analyst can bring. So machine learning is going to always rely on the security specialist and expert in order to curate a data set, in order to define how to use how to unleash the machine learning on the data and on the problems. And that's just never going to go away. Furthermore, there's a whole host of, even when one releases a machine learning model into the wild, it's information security specialists who are coaching it and telling it where it's wrong, what it got right. That's just never going to go away. Hopefully, we'll be able to help to scale. As the volume of data is becoming more and more difficult to deal with, hopefully we'll be able to scale some of those human expert efforts with the use of machine learning.
When we do get to the point where we can start replacing people, I have a list of people I'd like you to replace.
Good one, Jack.
But, to your point, the value when there are so few people who know, Michael's not on to get into the whole skill shortage thing, but what I see is I'm not intimidated by this. I think the idea of intelligent and experienced people wasting less time on tedium and letting machine learning systems present us with challenges that need human context is like the first step in this path. Is that a pipe dream, or is that really where you're trying to go by using our time better and letting the machines do what they do better than we do, and then in using our human resources better at where it takes the subtlety of the human mind to be kind to the insanity that is humanity?
Well said, Jack. And I think that's exactly right. I'd agree with that. That our first step is to help and assist the human, and it's going to be a while before those kind of expert tasks are replaced full scale.
Along those lines, Hyrum, I've gotten into somewhat debates with people about. So we're at this point in security where I feel like machine learning is like a thing that lots of people are getting excited about. And so do data scientists become security professionals, or do security professionals become data scientists? Like, which end of the pendulum do you see it swinging, or is it somewhere in between? And how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I see it both ways. So my path and that of many of my colleagues was, first machine learning. So I guess I'll back up. I'll say that both approaches are totally valid and bring sort of different strengths to the table. The people who start in InfoSec know way more about security than I do. And the people who start in machine learning, they usually have a really solid math basis, and they can dive into the weeds and the detail of the models and the math. And both of those are important as one is trying to unleash a system into the wild that you can trust, that has both sort of the expert curation and blessing and effort provided by the security expert, and also sort of the nuances of the data science. So yeah, it definitely happens both ways. For example, at Endgame, I'd say that, I think all of our InfoSec data scientists were data scientists first, but we have an awful lot of people without the title data science. They're InfoSec people first, but they're really, really good at understanding and talking about and reasoning about data science models. So those are both extremely valuable to us.
So, and again, my next question along those lines are, I find that large organizations, large financial, large healthcare, we're talking hundreds of thousands of just employees of the organization, I'm finding more and more that they're taking advantage of machine learning. And I think largely that stems from they have their own data scientists on premise, like in the insurance industry, for example, and they're like, we can use you for some security stuff, right? And they're building their own software and their own models. And the question I always have for them is, how much of that can you sustain yourself? And I know you work for a vendor, Hyrum, and have in your past couple of roles, but I'm how much of that do you want to rely on other vendors for as well? And isn't it better in some circumstances to let vendors like Endgame and others do that on the endpoint rather than trying to build stuff yourselves? What advice do you have for organizations, the large organizations?
Yeah. Well, the first advice is, I guess, for those organizations who have data scientists on hand, information security is a different beast entirely than what you get when you're working with images or text to speech or whatever.
Yay, we are a unique snowflake.
we are a special snowflake. So here's the deal. In information security, there are bad guys who are actively trying to get around your model. So it sets up this adversarial condition that most data scientists, until recently, aren't dealing with quite as much. So there's this, game theoretic cat and mouse problem that is constantly evolving. So if I'm building a face recognition system at Facebook, my face is not trying to morph to combat the detection problem and evade it. But that is certainly the case in information security. And that creates a whole new set of problems that you can't just take sort of the tools and blindly apply them. It takes some, as I mentioned before, some expertise, some nuance to get this going.
If I may push back then, what I'm hearing you say is a little bit contradictory perhaps to your earlier statement where InfoSec people can become data scientists and vice versa. If I might suggest, being an InfoSec person, sometimes it's more of a mindset, it's a lifestyle, it's a personality. In other words, it's not necessarily something you can learn, in my opinion. Others might weigh in, but I would think then it would be easier to make an InfoSec professional into a data scientist rather than vice versa. But that's my bias. What do you think?
I will take you up there, Jeff. And I would say you're right in the sense that there's a learning curve in so many ways for information security, not only in sort of these adversarial settings that I described, but also vocabulary that can be daunting. That same sort of daunting task exists for an InfoSec person trying to get into machine learning. There's a vocabulary.
Right.
I've been rejected a number of times submitting papers that are mathy and machine learning-y to security conferences. It's like oil and water, right? There's the reviewers don't say it, but implicit is too much math, won't read, right?
TLDR, too much math. Yeah.
Exactly.
TLDR, because maths.
Yeah.
Yes.
Math is hard.
Yes.
So, it brings up a great point, though. Like, we in the industry, so, what does data science do for security? Well, I think there's a couple things. Number one, it just adds to this. We need to be a big tent in security and have different kinds of minds and different kinds of perspectives looking at this problem. So if nothing else, data science brings that. And number two, I really do believe that data science can help in scaling the human and solving automation problems in a really good way and generalizing. And we need to do a better job at making this oil and water kind of mix a little bit better. Because if you draw that Venn diagram of data science and InfoSec, the intersection is still materializing and getting bigger, but it's not as mature as either of the sort of circles that form it.
There's your next talk at a security conference. Data science and you, my first maths.
And one of the things that you're going to notice with the community is that the community is kind of split in two sides. You're going to find more of the IT regulation blue side, and then you're going to find the red side, which is more of the penetration testing, hacking kind of stuff. And you're going to see that at least on the blue side, probably you'll get a bit more receptive crowd than on the red side. Typically, we've seen it in conferences like DEF CON. We've seen it in several other cons that when you submit a paper, and if it is not an attack technique, if you provide defense, they say no, not sexy enough. It has to be something sexy. Most conferences, now that there are so many of them, they're constantly looking for stuff that is sexy, stuff that gets crowds in, and it has to be attack.
I think what we're saying is math isn't sexy. I think that's really the moral.
No, I think it's the crowd.
No.
I think it's more of the crowd.
No, you're right, Carlos.
Math is dead sexy. It just has to be presented at a conference correctly.
That's right.
You've got to remember.
Do you know why math is so attractive? It's because there are a lot of figures. You got that?
Wow.
Love it.
That's a new one.
Love it.
Sweet. I'm using that on my 9-year-old when I get home.
Hiram, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about.
Hey, Paul.
Yep.
Jack had a comment, I believe.
Okay,
I
so
was
Jack,
just going to say that one of the interesting splits, though, is that the InfoSec industry really is built out of early security, which came out of World War II, which is built on what, Jeff? Crypto, which is built on math. And yet we have a lot of folks with an aversion to math, which is kind of an interesting turning our back on where we came from. But, math is difficult. I think there's a challenge with a lot of us that come from the network side, particularly who are self-educated college dropouts, or I'll be honest, college drunk out in my case. Although I enjoyed math, I can count and stuff. But there is a challenge, and math is. I think you have to have a deeper understanding of math than most people get, even in an undergraduate degree, to see how to see the forgive the term, see the beauty of mathematics, or the excitement in mathematics, because at a surface level, even on an undergraduate degree level, math is just one of those things you have to do until you get to a point where it's part of what you do. I don't want to project too much, Hyrum, but that from my overeducated friends, I've seen that, and from my own failed attempts at education, I've seen that.
I agree with you, Jack. I don't want to undervalue the value of math and mathematicians. I've worked with many mathematicians, especially in a previous life. Brilliant people, but again, brilliant people that, when confronted with the unique challenges or the different way of viewing the world, that call it the hacker mentality, really struggled. So maybe what the best scenario is more of partnership. You don't have to be great at both, but learn to speak each other's language so you can work side by side, both the data scientist and the InfoSec professional.
Oh no! Do we have to act like people again?
And as you mentioned, it is also the presentation. For example, let's take Bloodhound, something that the old now dead ATD group from Verus came up with. Bloodhound did a bunch of analysis of all of the connections, presented that to you in a diagram, in pre-pictures, and did all of the math. And when you take the presentation, half of the presentation is them talking about the algorithms that they had to choose, how they tuned those algorithms, what type of how they fed the data, and to tune them, garbage in, garbage out, good data in, good data out, and they discuss all of the trials and errors and how they got there. I think it is the presentation plays a heavy point there. Typically, I would say just trick a bit on your call for papers. Say, I've had friends that all of a sudden say, okay, I'm going to talk about Active Directory, the sexy attack. They get in and they talk about sexy attacks, and then they add the defense side, or they add the login side, and the sexy that they put in the CFP was only the first 10 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Hyrum, let me ask you this as an example of that. Some people I talk with are, when we talk about the authentication problem, we talk about passwords, two-factor authentication. As security professionals, we tend to really point out the limitations of both of these systems. Now, you mentioned before the Facebook algorithm that can look at your face, and how it's tough to look at that as anything other than fingerprinting your face, for lack of a better term. But what if we were to tackle the problem, and I think this is a great intersection between data science and security. If we were to look at the problem and say, well, I can understand people's behavior, how they hold their phone, how they swipe their phone, and how they use the technology, and use that as a signature using machine learning in the background, and from that develop their level of access, or ascertain their level of access based on their behaviors. There's a lot of data science that goes into that. We as security professionals are very skeptical. So what do you think of that problem, and how does it help kind of describe this interaction between security and data science?
Great question,
Yeah,
Paul.
so the user behavior, this is a problem that's not entirely new, but not really, I should caveat, I'm not an expert in this, but as I've played with that problem just a little bit, I found it to be extremely difficult. to uniquely identify a user. And the reason is, again, we're sort of, we exhibit mass behaviors and the things that we do, the sites that we go to. We're certainly our own little snowflakes, as was mentioned previously, but anytime that you have a problem in which you're trying to uniquely identify somebody who is a dynamic being who changes their behavior over time, that can be prone to false positives and false negatives like any problem. But I like the idea and the concepts. I think that people are working on that, actually, but I would love to actually know more about the state and maturity of that, because in my sort of naive understanding of that and my own toying with that problem, it's sort of kind of really immature still.
Where can we
really hold on, Paul? It's really not a new problem. I think perhaps maybe the application is new. But user behavior is something that may or may not have been used in a previous lifetime many years ago.
Yeah, so UEBA for anomaly detection is a thing that with data science is still growing and developing. A lot of vendors are marketing this. The problem with this, and I apologize, I'm going to do math with you right now. So the problem with UEBA is this. If you look at your web browsing traffic, all of us together and everybody in organizations, and you try to, draw some distribution of what normal looks like, the picture you have in your mind should not be a bell curve. It should be this really weird shaped donut where all behavior lives on the tails of the distribution. So that makes it really hard to figure out anomalous, because everything is anomalous. Everything is unique. And that's one reason that UEBA is difficult. And this version of machine learning that's called unsupervised machine learning, so sort of constituting what normal is and finding deviations from it, has been researched, is going on and getting better. But again, I would say is slightly more prone to false positives than sort of supervised machine learning methods.
Not to shoot down the measurement, but I think the bell curve might actually exist for the web surfing stuff, in that the bell curve, that peak of that curve would probably be porn. Yeah, but I understand the metaphor that you were going with.
But think about it.
To follow the metaphor, Larry, I think what he's saying is he can't, or machine learning cannot distinguish your porn watching habits from Paul's porn watching habits.
Oh no, they could. They could. They're very distinct.
But I think what Hirum's talking about is the user is so dynamic that factors that the machine learning algorithms aren't looking at. I have a conversation with someone, and the next day, randomly throughout my day, I'm like, oh, I got to go to that website and check that out. Yeah. And since most of us have this ADD kind of syndrome, if not ADD or ADHD itself, we're like, oh, I need to go there and do that. And
I tell you right now, 3 minutes ago, I'm like, shit, I need a battery disconnect from my Jeep. Yeah. Seriously, I was literally looking at Amazon for battery disconnect.
But now, Hyrum, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, where we're more successful in information security with machine learning is not analyzing user behavior so much as we are analyzing the behavior of malicious programs. Is that correct?
Well, that's one area. And again, I am not an expert in UEBA, and there's 100 vendors listening to me right now who are up in arms about my claims here. But this is just from my limited experience. But I will say that as I have approached problems, these sort of detecting the thing is easier than detecting the who. Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment.
So,
malicious programs and the behavior of programs who are a lot more deterministic than a human.
Even if the behavior of programs is artificial in intelligence, I mean, as a bot to a certain extent, that's easier than determining a user or person, human being's behavior, right? I
mean, that's a broad sweeping statement, but I'll go with it. Yeah.
So where are the
it doesn't fit with the data science, Paul. It's broad.
That's right. But now, so where are the wins in information security, Hyrum, in your experience that where machine learning can help us the most in information security?
Yeah, it's anywhere that you can have a massive labeled data set. So malware is a good one, right? A lot of work on sort of phishing or spoofing domain names. That's a good one, where people have gone through and have massive data sets. A model can sort of learn in a way that is hard for a human to summarize what constitutes malicious versus benign, and furthermore can learn to generalize, not as well as a human, but approaching that capability. So yeah, malware is a great example if you wanted to talk about something in detail about how that works. But those again are still improving.
I think the domain one was one that's hit close to home really recently, given that you talk about domain reputation and what it's done over time and some of those types of things. And the other one that you mentioned, that domain reputation tied with DNS. Potentially, if you think about the way that we're doing a lot of command and control for either nation state type stuff, that DNS is seeing a lot more increase in some of that the command and control stuff. And one of the things that we've been seeing on a recent test is we're using DNS as command and control, and DNS queries are fairly static. They've got a flat line and evenly distributed, and all of a sudden this one domain takes off like gangbusters. 20,000 DNS requests in a day, and then the next day it's 500,000, and 480,000 of them are to this domain that is unusual. Or just why 480,000 to this one domain?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and the same when you apply it, let's say, to malware. When you're looking at malware, you're seeing a bunch of binaries. One of the things that you're seeing is they're not encrypted. Most of the time, they're not compressed. Most of the time, they do not create a remote thread. They do not set another thread to start a process. They do not expand their own memory and then mark that memory right. So there are certain behaviors that it is in the data of the process that you can actually trigger on. And the thing is that the information of those PE files and libraries in memory is, as he mentioned, they're labeled. They have fields that you can actually check and correlate and feed into the algorithm.
Along those lines, Hyrum, are there things that you can tell, like tips for security professionals to be able to identify situations where machine learning would be extremely valuable? Larry and Carlos just mentioned some examples. Are there like tips where we can better utilize machine learning to help us accomplish our goals?
A lot of problems where you find yourself looking at lots of data and trying to discover a pattern yourself. That should be an immediate red flag that says, "Oh my goodness, I should investigate or ask somebody about just a simple method to start sort of this machine learning model forming." So, security logs, right? When people are looking at that, and a human can say, these are bad events, these are good events. As soon as you can start to label that set and bootstrap yourself into a labeled data set, that is a prime field ripe for machine learning to take hold. Now, there's no guarantee about how successful you'll be with the machine learning, right? That's a separate thing, but at least it's a place you can start asking of the data how successful you can be.
So with the work you're doing at Endgame, kind of where is that focused, and what are some examples of models that you've come up with that have been really successful in detecting bad, right?
Paul, I just loved how you asked that question and threw in the word model. You talk like a data scientist already. I appreciate it.
Look at that. Osmosis.
And I am waiting for this answer because math hates me, and I hate math, but I've grown to love it over the years. And I'm like, I want to hear this. This is fascinating. So, sorry.
Yeah. So I'll first say, Endgame's been pretty open about the things it's been working on. So you can find a lot of this in published papers and whatnot. We do make an effort to contribute to the community in peer-reviewed papers, and we post to Archive, which is a place you can go to, download papers for free. And we've also presented some of this work, the data science and InfoSec work at, for example, some of the more accepting math InfoSec conferences. We did this at B-Sides. I presented B-Sides Las Vegas and DEF CON last year. So a couple of things that are really cool. So we, in a couple months ago, we released to VirusTotal our machine learning-based malware detection engine called Malware Score.
Ooh.
And we're really proud of that. It was a huge validating step for us to release to VirusTotal. This is a very classic machine learning problem. Tons of malware, tons of benign-ware, and we label them carefully. And the most important job probably is getting those labels right. And if there's any reason our model is better and worse than our competitors, that's a big reason is how careful we are with that labeling. And then we, from each of these files, we'll extract important salient features from the Windows PE file. That's in consultation with some of our really smart InfoSec folks here who help guide us in, the data science team in getting those important features right. And we build a model, and now it's released. It's tiny and it's fast and it's highly potent. So we like that. Another really interesting thing that we've worked on, I mentioned actually in passing, we've also done some work on detecting domain generation algorithms. So can you look at the domain generated by a malware's DGA? Can you just look at a domain and tell me if it came from a DGA or not, right? So that's a cool problem. So can I tell by just the outgoing DNS requests whether there's a piece of malware trying to call home? That also, we've used both supervised and some unsupervised learning for that. The unsupervised learning, I think, is really interesting. In this model, it's using some really sophisticated and modern machine learning approaches where we actually we play this game. There's a red team and a blue team model competing against each other. One of them's job is to detect DGAs, and the other one's job is to produce ever more difficult domain names to confuse the blue team. So they play this match over and over and over, and in the process, they both kind of get better at their jobs. The blue team model gets really good at telling DGA from not DGA, and the red team, as a byproduct, we've created a machine learning based domain generation algorithm that produces domain names that might fool you and me as if we look at it. So that's pretty cool.
Does it ask you if you want to play a game when you use this? That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like old school Zork from the command line. Would you like to play a game? North, south, east, or west, right?
Yes.
That sounds just like purple teaming, when you have blue and red working together and making each other better instead of fighting each other.
Yeah, this is a machine learned purple team scenario. Exactly.
Is the machine contributing to the exercise of the exchange, or is it at that point a manual process amongst the teams?
So this in the scenario I described, this will never take the place of human red and blue teaming, but it is a way to generate at a massive scale a lot of data, and it is wholly automated. You unleash red team and blue team, and they fight against each other. This is called a generative adversarial network. So a network of two adversaries playing this game against each other. Really kind of cool.
And now, is this in practice inside the product or some kind of thing that people can use, or?
Yeah, these are really early efforts. I think Endgame is one of the vendors that are championing its use in information security. It's being used elsewhere, but for far different purposes. It's really what happens now is when you play this red versus blue team, the byproduct are a bunch of domain names that could fool a classifier. So we can use these if we're really careful and carefully augment our data set and train our production model. So we're not actually using either the red or the blue model anywhere in production, but the data produced from that can be used to supplement and harden other machine learning models, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
that's really cool.
Yeah.
See, math is cool.
Yeah, little mushroom cloud just came right up over the top of my head.
Are there behaviors and then subsequent like data sets that you can tag inside of malware, Hyrum, that in your analysis were like, wow, that was like really like easy to like pinpoint this type of behavior? Because I feel like in a lot of us security professionals know that when we look at malware, we're like, wow, whoever wrote that was not very smart at being able to deceive a blue team, for example. So there's specific models that you have that you look at, you're like, wow, that was really kind of too easy.
Like the model is so successful that you said, oh, that was an easy win.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't happen as much as I'd like it to, because of the scale of the data and the variety of actors we're dealing with. But what I think does happen sometimes is that when, as successful as we are, and, we have high standards in information security, we want to catch all the things and never false positive on anything, right? But there's always this inherent trade-off between the things you can catch and the things you false positive on, especially in data science. And that is something we're always trying to get better at across the industry. I'm not talking Endgame specifically, but as data scientists, we are sensitive to this trade-off in false positive and false negative rate. However, as we're building these models and one turns out to be really successful, often when you go back and you look and you ask the model, why are you making this decision? And you show it to an InfoSec guy, they'll say, oh yeah, well, that's because he's clearly DLL injecting here, right? I mean, the model has discovered something we've known all along.
I see.
So that's kind of a feel-good moment when the computer has learned all on its own something that a human has learned over a long time, right? In a community.
Well, that's really cool. Other questions from the rest of the security? Go ahead, Jeff.
I just very fascinating. I wonder if in the machine learning, especially in the purple, teaming we were just talking about, whether there's a susceptibility to trying to figure out how to describe it, to become successful because it learns how to be successful, not from an inherent, hey, it's really doing its job, but because it's learning based on, I guess, the pattern or the behavior of the other side. That's a machine doing the same thing. Am I making sense?
You are.
Are there limitations? Okay. It's hard for me to get the question out, but
there definitely are, and we're relying on some cool findings here. So obviously, if you play a game red versus blue, and red starts to beat this blue, or blue starts to detect this red, the question is, can I somehow generalize that to other scenarios, right? It's not clear.
Yeah, well,
that
I guess what I'm saying is it gets really good at beating the particular opponent, but it doesn't necessarily learn if you change the opponent. It's kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah, the question is, can it generalize to other opponents? And
yes.
What we have found is really interesting, and this has been validated actually first by other academic researchers, and then secondly by us in the specific InfoSec domain of detecting DGAs. But we found that what's really clever is because machine learning models all tend to share some common characteristics, and I'm going to be mathy again.
Go for it.
Yes.
All it means is that it turns out that most machine learning models are locally linear. So near a certain query point, they all kind of look the same. And because of that, if I attack and defeat one model, there's a good chance that that same attack will work against a second model. Not perfectly, but there's a non-zero probability. There's a high probability that.
But it's not working for the way you intended. It's working because of the limitation of the machine learning.
It is learning to find an attack vector that works across a large number of different machine learning model attacks, if that makes sense. So it might not work every time, but it's pretty successful.
I mean, I might be way oversimplifying it, but to use an education analogy where everybody complains about standardized testing, and it becomes a very common problem that teachers tend to teach to the test. So kids are wildly successful passing the tests because they've been taught to pass the test, which isn't necessarily an indicator of whether they're learning or not.
But they go to get a job and they can't perform, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
that's fair.
Okay.
Hyrum, when our listeners are evaluating vendor products, and regardless of the space and security, we all see the term behavioral analysis. And I think it was John Strand and I learned to really question what that means. Like, what questions would you ask, or what things can you arm with us to, kind of dig into what a vendor means by behavioral analysis?
Oh man, I could go into this a lot, not just about behavior, but about everybody who is talking about next gen AV or machine learning. There's a laundry list of questions that you should ask. And that, we try to ask ourselves, not just at Endgame, but my colleagues at even competing companies. We need to do better about being honest and not letting the sort of marketing buzz and hype take over. For behavior, one thing that I think when you and I think about behavior, some vendors can get by calling something behavior that's not sort of at the same level. So behavior to them might just mean I'm looking for a certain sequence of API calls that constitutes a behavior. I don't know. You tell me, is that behavior?
Right.
I would say that's a rule, and that is not actually learning any kind of behavior. So to me, a behavior is learning a repeated set of patterns over time and kind of generalizing that into a model about how this thing or this person behaves. And that's a hard problem. So I would ask questions to try to get to the bottom of that. Another question you have to ask, whether it be behavior or not, behavior, especially in my experience again, and I've only spent research time on this, not product time. Behavior is prone to false positives and false alarms that can really wear down a user if he's sorting through these things. For example, I remember looking at trying to find beaconers in data, and you know what? Time and again, the beaconer we found was your toolbar, right? Because he's sitting there beaconing out, and is that something the user wants to see? I mean, that we're finding a behavior, but is that a useful behavior for the end user? I don't think it is. So those are hard problems. Asking about the false positive rate, about the false positive versus true positive rate trade-off, especially with behavior, I think vendors really have a challenge to appropriately measure their own progress on that. Can you with certainty say that I am detecting a certain percent of these kind of malicious behaviors at a low false positive rate? Anyway, I could go on and on about that.
Yeah, and there's where I see a real value on machine learning. Because let's take an example of the AV industry. You're getting a bunch of false positives due to the rules. There's nothing you can do. Now, in the case of machine learning, since the system is constantly learning and improving itself via labeled data, as soon as you start getting a bunch of false positives, the user can actually go into a console and actually provide feedback saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And at the same time, the algorithm will then take that data, feed it into the module, and be able to then come out with a better process to determine if it is something is malicious or not. It can get that additional input to then improve upon its decision cycle.
Right,
But
and that requires burn-in time, which may or may not be a good thing. But
isn't that by
like that
definition
problem space.
not machine learning because you're providing it the input manually?
Well, all machine learning requires input. It requires a labeled set. What you're actually doing is you're helping it along and improving that data set for it to then learn and improve on itself.
So I would step back just 1 second and say there are two sort of broad approaches to tackle this problem. One is, Carlos, just like you said, I develop a labeled set of what constitutes normal behavior and bad behavior, and that's labeled. The other is anomaly detection, where I have this burn-in time where I try to learn on the fly what constitutes normal behavior, and then anything that departs from that, I alert the user. And that's when things like the web toolbar becomes difficult. But yeah, in both cases, having user feedback is extremely important to have if the user has the patience to sift through a dozen of those a day or whatever.
Yeah, and the problem is that we're still dealing with the issue that many organizations out there actually want an appliance, a blinky box that does everything for them. We're still fighting the fight of getting people trained, having not only trained on the basics, but hey, you bought this blinky box for $100,000. Are you spending any of that money also on training on how to use the blinky box?
Nope.
No, the blinky box will do it for us. That's what sales said. And as you mentioned, the burn-in time is what actually we get friction with most organizations because they really do not want to invest in the meatware.
Hyrum, it is now time in our program where we ask you the 5 questions.
Ooh, and Paul, I got 2 bonus questions for him. I can go before or after.
Okay.
Well, if they're bonus, they got to be at the end.
That's right.
All right.
All right,
I'll be at the end.
Hyrum, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I think I am.
3 words to describe yourself.
Tall, skinny, and driven.
Now that's a data set.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Calculus.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Geez, these are hard questions. 5 kids and how I survived.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Never played. I just always like to go first in things.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional or otherwise.
Oh, geez. I'm going to say Jimmy Stewart. I think that's about the right age for my dad. Let's see, for my mom.
I like how Hyrum is like a math guy, and he's like, it has to be the right age, and he calculated that in his head, like what the right age would be. I think that's awesome.
Yep. Now, Hyrum, this is
Audrey Hepburn. There you go.
Yeah. Audrey Hepburn. All right.
Yeah, there you
I was
go.
going to say, Hyrum, this is 2017. It could be 2 dads. It could be 2
That's
moms.
it.
They may December relationships. I mean, there's math there.
So, Jeff, bonus questions, Jeff.
Bonus question number 1. What is the significance of August 29th, 1997? Hyrum?
I'm trying to think. I don't know.
He's Googling it.
I was living overseas at the time. I have no idea.
Okay. Anybody else want to fill in and answer the question?
To the Google.
To the Google. It is the day that Skynet became self-aware.
Oh.
Ooh.
Okay.
And reaching back even further, let's go another 30 years back in science fiction lore. Who or what is Norman? As in Norman, please compute. Maybe Jack will know this one.
I don't know this one either. Jack,
Norman,
Said
lifeline.
Jack's
Jack?
brain's hurt for this one because I should, but it's not coming to me. But
it's
I
from
don't
Star
remember
Trek,
Jackson.
the I Mud episode, where it's a planet full of androids and they're mostly women.
Right.
And the one that's in charge is Norman. Artificial intelligence trivia.
Wow, Jeff, that was
That was amazing, Jeff.
that was amazing.
Damn.
I'm kind of
That was
impressed, Jeff.
Deep,
That was
obscure something.
I am nothing if not something.
Not obscure.
obscure. Well, Hyrum, thank you very much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Great time.